Here is the continuation of a metaphysical description only of those planets upon which individual mind-body-spirit complexes have been, are, or shall be experienced. At one time-space, in what is our past, there was a population of third-density beings upon a planet which dwelt within our solar system. There are various names by which this planet has been named. The vibratory sound complex, most usually used by our peoples, is Maldek. The cycles of densities had begun much, much earlier upon this sphere, due to its relative ability to support the first-dimensional life forms at an earlier point in the space-time continuum of our solar system. These entities were much like our own third density in their physical appearance. The choice of this particular sublogos, under whose care we reside, for the third density physical vehicle has been without exception the bipedal erect ape-like form, and those who inhabited the planetary influence of what we have called Maldek had much the same culture and experience as we find now upon our own planet. The peoples of Maldek had a civilization somewhat similar to that of the societal complex known to us as Atlantis, in that it gained much technological information and used it without care for the preservation of their sphere, following to a majority extent the complex of thought, ideas, and actions which we may associate with our so-called negative polarity or the service to self. This was, however, for the most part, couched in a sincere belief thought structure, which seemed to the perception of the mind-body complexes of this sphere to be positive and of service to others. The devastation that racked their biosphere and caused its disintegration resulted from what we call war. The escalation went to the furthest extent of the technology this social complex had at its disposal in the space-time present of the then time. The planet was destroyed by the use of the nuclear and crystal-powered weapons of this population. This time was approximately 705,000 years ago. There was a spewing of its particles throughout the local vicinity. The Earth being within that vicinity, there was then the coating of some portions of Earth with a fine dust-like substance. These particles upon Earth may be found by archaeologists or geologists who are able to correlate various levels of strata of the Earth composition in its surface. There was also, within the local vicinity of the planet known as Maldek, a vibration of waves which traveled great distances and did affect some harmonic resonance, shall we say, with neighboring planets, causing momentary shifts in magnetic fields, so that the core structure of the neighboring planets was somewhat altered, though not to a degree that may be noticed by any measurements, which our current technology of instruments could record. These entities, destroying their planetary sphere, thus were forced to find room for themselves upon this third density, which is the only one in our solar system at their time-space present, which was hospitable and capable of offering the lessons necessary to decrease their mind-body-spirit distortions with respect to the law of one. These entities were so traumatized by this occurrence that they were in what we may call a social complex knot, or tangle of fear. In the occurrence of planetary dissolution, none escaped, for this is an action which redounds to the social complex of the planetary complex itself. Some of our time passed. No one could reach them. No beings could aid them. This continued for what we would call eons of our time. Those aiding them were repeatedly unable to reach them. Approximately 600,000 years ago, the then existing members of the Confederation were able to deploy a social memory complex and untie the knot of fear. The entities were then able to recall that they were conscious. This awareness brought them to the point upon what we would call the lower astral planes, where they could be nurtured until each mind-body-spirit complex was able to be healed, finally of this trauma to the extent that each entity was able to examine the distortions it had experienced in the previous life illusion complex. After this experience of learn, teaching, and healing was accomplished, these entities were then able to determine the appropriate movement, shall we say, in order to set up conditions for alleviation of the consequences of their actions. The group decision was to place upon itself a type of what we may call karma alleviation. For this purpose, they came into incarnation within our planetary surface rather than upon it, in what were not acceptable human forms. This, then, they have been experiencing until the distortions of destruction are replaced by distortions towards the desire for a less distorted vision of service to others. Since this was the conscious decision of the great majority of those beings in the Maldek experience, the transition to this planet began approximately 500,000 years ago, and the type of body complex available at that time was used. They came through the process of harvest and were incarnated through the processes of incarnation from our higher spheres within this density. The transfer, as we call it, has been gradual. Over 2 billion souls are those of Maldek, which have successfully made the transition. These entities are working their understanding complexes through a series of what we would call karmic restitutions. They dwell within our deeper underground passageways and are known to us as Bigfoot. These are one type of Bigfoot. The consciousness of these entities has always been third density. The alleviation mechanism was designed by the placement of this consciousness in second-dimensional physical-chemical complexes, which are not able to be dexterous or manipulative to the extent which is appropriate to the workings of the third-density distortions of the mind complex. These entities were aware of their need for rectifying the consequences of their action and were in some confusion, in an incarnate state, as to the circumstances of their incarnation, the unconscious being aware, the conscious being quite confused. This created a calling. The Confederation sent love and light to these entities. Many of these entities were able to remove the accumulation of what we call karma, thus being able to accept a third density cycle within a third density body. Most of those beings, so succeeding, have incarnated elsewhere in the creation for the succeeding cycle in third density. As this planet reached third density, some few of these entities became able to join the vibration of this sphere in the third density form. There remain a few who have not yet alleviated, through the mind-body-spirit coordination of distortions, the previous action taken by them. Therefore, they remain. The entity known to us as Mars was stopped in mid-third density, thus being unable to continue in progression due to the lack of hospitable conditions upon the surface. The bellicose attitudes and the intention of aggression and harm between various populations on the planet of Mars led to a scenario in which there was a gradual decline in the biosphere due to literal destruction of ecosystems. Approximately 75,000 years ago, this gradual decline was exacerbated as energies escalated and weaponry and attitudes became far more destructive in nature as the desire for destruction grew. Thus, a slow decline of both ecosystem and population for a matter of time that eventually concluded with a singular event that spawned a much quicker decline in a matter of months because of weaponry that disrupted a central aspect of the planetary ecosystem, being that life-giving force of water and the cycle of water. As a result, the atmospheric environment of their planet became inhospitable to third-density beings. Through this disruption of the cycle of water, there was a chain of events that unfolded in which the ecosystem itself deteriorated and the soul of the planet faded, thus resulting in a deterioration of a magnetosphere or magnetic field, thus solidifying the lack of ability of life to again take grasp upon this planet. This planet shall be undergoing healing for some space-time millennia. The guardians of this planet went before the Council of Saturn and asked for permission to move that population to Earth. The second-density vehicles available for physical use upon planet Earth at that time were late second-density great ape bodies, which the Guardians felt might be improved upon by articulating facial features a bit more carefully, by altering the set of the body, so it would be able to stand upright, and by improving the dexterity of the physical vehicle, especially in the hands, and by creating a larger capacity within the mind that came with that biological species.